Hi, John.
Hi, Alex.
Let's discuss domains, the big topic everybody is talking about. Every day we see dozens of tweets about domains. I want to talk to you about what type of domains do you buy for your main projects and domains you buy for your side projects. Also, I want to hear your opinion about the famous saying of Paul Graham. He said, if you don't have x.com, you don't name it X. It means that if you don't have, for example, domain resend.com, you don't name your company Resend.
I think that .com are really important just because a lot of the browsers actually add .com when you type something into the URL. For example, you type resend, and if there is no domain after resend, it will add .com automatically. So I think that will be a growing case. I think all browsers will get there eventually. And since often don't remember your whole domain and they just remember the name and they guess your extension is .com because they will not remember if it's .net or if it's .io. It's really difficult to remember that. So they will often go to the wrong website. And that happens to me really often. Like my websites, which are on not.com, often I see people on the wrong website. So that's kind of
Technicians, geeks.
well, no, just when I talk to people, or for example, when I mention my project on Twitter already, I don't include the URL. I say like it's a Next.js starter or OSS software, and often people guess that it's, and I have to add .com. But once I add .com, then it looks like I'm linking, and then on the Reddit, it's a problem. That's why when you have .com, you can easily say the name of the project, and people will find your website. So that's one reason. The second reason is the SEO. I have like 32 websites now, and those with .com have much higher traffic than those without. And I even made some experiments on that with directories, because they all start from zero, and usually they all grow in the same way. And my best directories are either .com or .org. But .com are better. Like my best directory, .com. Of course, I had this old GPT.co in the past, and I think that if the directory had .com in it, I would have like 5 or 10x more traffic than I had. I had a lot of traffic, but it would be even more. But that was not real SEO traffic because it was just lucky to be the first directory and people were linking to it. And obviously, if a lot of people link to you, you have good SEO traffic. But for a regular project, .com is way better, even if your domain is ending up being longer, just because you have to find some more combinations of words. I also found that work is good if your project is not, for example, for directories. .org is really good because most directories are not for profit, and I think Google kind of likes that, like the information stuff. Also, the developer resources are good on .org. For example, if it's a documentation for some framework or something, it also goes well. For example, DevHunt is .org. It makes sense for that project because it's open source projects for developers, and then .org makes sense. But everything else, I don't really see an advantage there. I rather see there's an advantage there. I see AI being not that bad, which I guess the way Google works is that it learns and it sees that certain extension does really well, and people click on that link from search results and they end up staying there, and then they think, all right, so this extension is good and we will start boosting it. I think that's what they do, because at the beginning AI was really bad, because I had AI project at the beginning and traffic was bad, and whenever you search for projects you would never find AI on the top. But right now you find a lot on the top with AI extension. So I think for typical AI projects, having AI in the extension is not bad. But again, we know famous examples where Peter Levels, for example, he had AI, and then he bought .com, and he had traffic growing almost instantly or pretty soon after that. So I think .com is still better. And if you have AI project, it's better to add AI into the name, like I did with SEO bot. So it's SEObotai.com instead of having SEO. And a good example here is that there is a project that's called SEO bot, and we are higher than that project when people search for SEO bot. Like if you try search
Oh, wow.
for SEO bot, I think we are higher than.
Okay, everybody wants .coms. Let's assume it's true. How do you get one? Because they're all taken. It sounds like if
Not
you're
really.
homeless, just buy a house.
No, it's just I have a lot of domains on .com, and I never paid more than $10 for them. Like never ever. It's always $8 to $9. It's like the cheapest price you can find. And you just have to be more creative. For example, I bought MVP Wizards, or I bought Next.js Starter. That was like really good one. And it was free. Or I bought AI.com. So I think you just have to be creative with the words and spend time. And I spend hours on searching for .com domains, but eventually I always find them. And I have a lot of them bought. Like you said, you're buying them and collecting them. I have a lot of them in my list, but I bought them not to resell, but rather to build something later.
Does it make sense to buy a .com which has no meaning? For example, we have that startup called Algolia.com. Algolia is not a real word. Or should I focus on something meaningful like resend? I can't buy one word domain, maybe it will be 2 or 3 words, such as SEO bot, AI.com. What's your tactic here?
I think for one Algolia that made it big, there are like 100 others that failed. For example, I remember when I was in VC back world, most companies would always buy .com because they had money for that. And often they would buy something like Algolia. They would invent a word so that they can build a brand around it. And it almost never worked for most. But of course, for some it worked, like Zoho.com or Algolia.com or others. But most fail. So I think from this point, there's less chance to fail if you have a name that speaks for itself. For example, with Resend, it makes a lot of sense that Google will send more SEO traffic to Resend on topics around sending emails than to a word that means nothing, right? That's kind of self-evident and obvious. But I think for companies like Algolia or Zoho, like for bigger companies, they don't really think SEO being like really important. They rather think that they want to build a brand like Apple. They want to build a brand, and eventually people will remember this brand and associate the brand with the actual company. But I think for our audience, which is indie makers, I think it's very wrong idea to actually use these non-existent names. I think they should go for real, the most, like for example, Recent is good, or there's a company called Tiny Host, which is good. It's obvious what they do, right? Or SEO Bot is obvious what it does, or like all my projects are usually like that.
Okay, let's have a quick experiment. For example, I want to build a new startup. It will be, let's say, a website builder. How do you choose a domain name for that project? What's your way of thinking?
Yeah, so recently I started doing this. Since all the simple words were taken, like website builder, etc. Now I try something new. I use the verbs rather than the nouns. So for example, in this case, building a website or website builder, building a website, or a better example is the project they launched recently. It's Index Rusher, for example. Like everything around indexing was taken, like index fast, index easy, index pages, everything was taken. Then I took Index Rusher, rush the index, accelerate this thing, right? It kind of sounds right, and it's easy to understand what it means, and it's also easy for Google to map that into other stuff because it's easy to understand verbally. That's why I use that now. I have this new project called Rush Hoster, which is like it could be Rush Host, but it was taken. And then I add hoster. In case the website builder, they already have the build air, right? But most projects don't have. Like you can have resend or you can have resender. And then the resender is almost like resend. It has the same part. I think it's not that bad, and probably it's available. But basically, I end up adding something to the noun. It's like a prospect to the noun. Sometimes I even add an extra letter, like for example, listing bot. It has 2 T's, listing bot.
Yep.
And it worked really well. So if you search for a listing bot, you find this one, even it has 2 T's. So it is higher on Google ranking than listing bot with one, which is great. So it works. And that's really easy. Almost every word is available if you destroy the word by adding another T or another A or whatever. Just make sure to not add that in the middle of the word, because then Google will think that it's misspelling and it will try to correct, and you will end up going to the wrong website. So whenever you add something to the word to make it unique, add it at the end or at the beginning, not in the middle.
I'm curious about your opinion on investing in domains. I like buying domains. I think many makers do that. We are dreamers. We constantly purchase new domains. Is it a good practice or it's just a procrastination? And is it a good way to invest money?
I think it's really great way to build your revenues. I know people who are reselling domains and making a lot of money. I know people who bought domains for hundreds of thousands. We know someone who bought for 2 million, and they made someone rich. I think it's a good practice, but often people buy too many, and they should rather buy fewer but good rather than too many. I often see on Twitter the list of their domains. Like 90% of those are clearly never going to be interesting for anyone. I might be wrong, of course, but my intuition is pretty good because I've been seeing domains in use for like 20 years. So I think people should try to find good domain names and spend more time on quality rather than quantity. Because if once you start buying too many and spending like 5 minutes per domain, you have this habit, you develop the habit of buying lousy domains, and that'll be your habit. But if you create a habit where you don't buy unless you really feel the urge, and then you spend like hours or days or even weeks to search for a certain domain, then you will have the habit of buying good domains. And what I would do myself, or what I do myself, in fact, but I don't buy it to resell, I buy to build something for it. But I think that's what you have to do. But when you buy, imagine you want to build a product and you're buying it for yourself rather than for reselling. And then you have higher standards. And I usually find domain and then I put it into my favorites and I keep it there for weeks. Then I come back there, look at it again and then again. And then often I remove almost all of them because they look totally shit after a day or a week. And I have never had a case in my life where I had it in my bookmarks and then I open it in a week and it's gone. Never. So if that domain name was there for eternity before you were looking for it, it will be there for a week or two or a month or a year for sure. So that's why there's no need to really rush and buy it. So that do the other way, like put them into bookmarks. A lot of them do that instead of buying, and then clean it. Come there every week and clean it, add and clean. And eventually once a month, come there again and you have, let's say, 100 items there, rank them from best to the worst and buy top 3 and keep the rest there and keep cleaning them, keep adding them again. Do this every month. And I think that's what I do. And I like the domains I have. I'll probably quit them just so that people see, but I have really good domains and they're all made out of good words. And usually when I launch something with a domain has been bought a while ago, I just had it in my list, and my domains are my to-do list for my projects, basically. Like, for example, I have a domain SaaS emailer, like really .com. In this email SaaS world, everything is taken, but this was not taken. And I have a lot of domains like that, really good domains. I have user voices I will use for a project that's about user feedback. I have like count visits, for example, the one I use for my analytics. It's really good. Count visits. It can be better than that for explaining what the product does.
Okay, you said that you have that saasemailer.com domain name, and I instantly recalled loops.so, the most trending email for SaaS today. Why did they choose loops.so rather than saasemailer.com? And loops looks much sexier than saasemailer.com.
It happens because they have done a job on PR and your brain already remembers loops, and they've done a good job on the branding. So now when you hear loops, you see their project in front of your eyes, right? Same as Zuck or Apple. I think the reason they did that is that in Silicon Valley, SEO isn't a big thing. Like, I had some customers of my SEO products, which were like unicorns. I'm not kidding. And they had no SEO traffic. And they were like, we're starting almost from zero. What can your tools do? And I'm like, well, you're big, probably you don't need my tool. Then I look at their traffic and I realize, wow, they have no traffic. They have domain rating that's low. So I think for Silicon Valley startups, they bet on other channels. They bet on social media, on word of mouth, on big PR through news, through events, partnerships. If you look at Loops, now it's YC startup, and the best way or the default way how all YC startups grow is that they sell to other YC startups, and the other YC startups tell how good the startup is, not disclosing that it's actually because they are both from YC and they're helping each other. And then eventually they just start growing from this network effect. And then you see some big names naming Loops as a great tool, and then you get respect for that tool, and the brand is built, and it's all great. So that's why I think there's a huge difference on what you do if you're VC backed in YC and you're an indie maker. It's just a different world. I would say there's nothing that overlaps at all. Like if you want to fail as an indie maker, do what YC startups do. Then you'll fail nearly 100% because they have a lot of money for that PR. They have full department that's doing that job, and you don't have that. You want to have something on autopilot. They don't want to have anything on autopilot. They want to control, they want to grow fast, because the thing about autopilot and SEO is that you have no control. You might wait for 2 years until you get traffic, and maybe never get the traffic. They can't do that. They have to raise their next round. That's why they have to grow in 12 months, and they have to have predictable channels to grow. That's why I think, but then there is other company called Resend, and they actually bought resend.com for a really high price. I don't know what was the price. I think it was like 200,000 or something like that. Because before that, they had Resend.io or something like that. And when he bought, he looks like the Resend team looks more like a bootstrap team compared to Loops and others. They're like very small. They're founder driven. He's doing pretty much all the marketing of the company. So I think he's an indie maker who got into YC. And that's why he is going after this automated marketing.
As far as I know, became popular on Twitter. That guy, I don't remember his name. He was very active.
Chris, yeah, he was very active. But again,
you can do that.
Yeah, I think an indie maker must do that, but not every indie maker is able to do that. Like you have to have a talent to be big on Twitter, because otherwise everybody would be big, and you can see people being there for years, for 5 years, and they're not big. I think with SEO, you need less talent. It's more like a commodity. There's no genius needed for SEO game, at least for average game. An average game on SEO brings some traffic. Average game on Twitter brings no traffic. That's why there's a big difference.
So before you buy a domain, you must sit and think what I'm good at. If I'm good at hustling, at making content on Twitter, I buy Loops. If I'm bad at that, if I'm a technician, I bet on SEO and I buy SAS emailer.com or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I do that myself, even being good at social media, just because I have many products. Like I have to keep tweeting and creating all the time, because if you don't, then there's no traffic there. And it's a lot of work. You don't want to repeat the same things, and you want to be fresh. You want to be interesting. You don't want to look stupid. You want to look smart, and you want to give value to people. With SEO, it's different. SEO can be delegated. You can delegate social media. If you do, nobody can read what your hired social media manager writes. But with SEO, I did that. Like now I'm not doing it almost myself. Like I delegated that to other people, and they do it. And I just enter the game once in a while, give some advice, and then they keep doing it. And it works. They should always start with the idea that SEO will be their important channel. Whatever happens, even if they're good at social media, they still have to go that way, because it will give them the freedom they want, because indie makers want to be free. And if social media is the only channel you have, then that's your boss. And whenever you are not there tweeting, then you have no traffic.
So we only have social networks and SEO, nothing else? Everything else to consider when I choose a domain?
I think you might think this way. Am I building a small product that will run for a year, I will sell it and go for the next? Or am I building something I will spend a decade building? And if you're building something that will run for decades and maybe it'll be your lifelong project, then I would try to pick the name that's not just telling what the product does, but also has some potential to be a brand. Because SaaS emailer has no potential to be a brand because it's just a regular word saying that SaaS, like it's not going to do that. But if you plan to build a strong name, we can see around and find nearly no examples of big brands that are named this way. And that's a proof that this won't work. If you want to build big brand, maybe go towards things like SendGrid, for example. Right? Yeah. So it has send in it, so it tells something about the product, but then it's SendGrid. Like, what does that mean? Not clear. So it's easy to remember that. And when you see SendGrid in a sentence, it will look like a brand. It will not look like a word. Because if you see SaaS emailer in the sentence, you will think people are just saying that they're going to be emailing in the SaaS, right? Like, it doesn't look like a brand. And same with resend, since it's kind of strange. Like, you would not see that in a sentence, at least in a context. So I think the best way, the most difficult, but the best way, one word has to be about the product and the other word has to be about something else, like a word that's not really like the word that will never be next to this word, right? Like, you have to make sure that the second word will never be next to it in a normal sentence. In that case, when people see them next to each other, they will see that this is a brand name rather than just like two words next to each other.
Yeah, understood. Like index Russia, index is something about indexing Russia.
Yeah, exactly. You would never say like, for example, I was considering faster index, but then, faster index, you can imagine seeing faster index as two words in a sentence, but you never see index Russia because people don't speak that way. Like, it's not proper English. That's why you can break the English a little bit with using the word that makes sense, but people never use it that way.
Okay, you never told about the TLD.net. You only speak about .com and .org. Why not .net?
I see that .net is good on SEO. Like, a lot of the websites on the results are .net. I think .net was pretty popular back in 2010 or even before that. I think it was as popular as .com. I even think that it was more popular at some point just because this extension meant something. And I think com meant one thing and net meant the other thing. I think net meant an internet company and then com meant like a business. I think that's what it was. But at the same time, I think having .net, you have one problem, which is people have to remember that you have .net extension. And whenever someone buys .com, they will steal all your traffic if they really want. And that's a big problem. Like, if you get good traffic and you have .net or anything that's not .com, and somebody with .com comes into the game and does the same thing that you do, they will win your traffic.
Why did Zuck choose Threads.net then?
Friends? Threads.
Threads.net. Why?
Very strange. I don't know why. I don't think it's the whole project is a successful one compared to the power they have on promoting it. So maybe that's an example of a failure rather than a success. Because, like, I didn't know it's .net. And if I went now to my URL and type Threads, I would type threads.com. And I would end up somewhere wrong, right?
I even said press.com when I was referring to press.com.
Exactly. So I think it's just a mistake. But for him, it doesn't matter because I don't think he relies on SEO traffic. I think he don't need SEO traffic for Threads.
I guess it's just a bold move from Zuck to look more spontaneous.
Or he didn't have .com and people didn't want to sell it to them. And they came out with Threads brand and they didn't know any other better brand name for that. Could be. Because it's a good name. It's a good name. Easy to remember. It sounds strange. You're never going to say Threads. But I think it's a perfect brand name.
Okay, speaking of Threads.net, Zuck announced that they recently hit 200 million MAU. Is it worth investing time in Threads.net or should I stick to Twitter? And if I do, Should I also diverse my marketing activities? Should I post everywhere? LinkedIn, Threads.net, Twitter, whatever. Or as a beginner, I should focus on one channel only, grow there, and only then start to expand.
I walked this road a few years ago, right? When I was starting on social media, I had 0 followers just a year and a half ago on all, and I was thinking, what should I do? And I remember you asked your friend, and your friend said you should go big on one, and then once you're big there, then you have to spread to the rest. And I listened, and I went that way. But also, I tried both options, and I saw that basically in social media, there's one rule. It's not just about the number of social media, but also the content that you produce. So very tiny quality content brings way more traffic than regular. Like the best tweet can bring you more than everything you have tweeted in a year. And if we say that the social media game is a game of hunting for virality, then you have to do 2 things. You have to focus and you have to focus. So first you have to focus on one network, then you have to focus on the one tweet. So you have to try to make the bunger. And that means that you have to make it on one social media with one tweet. Because the key mistake people do, and I've done that at the first 6 months of my social media life. I had 0 growth on the first 6 months because I had average content everywhere, and it was just not remarkable. Everybody else has the same content. It's like pissing in the ocean. Like it just stays the same color. Nothing really changed. Maybe you cut this, but I think that's the key. You have to hunt the best tweet you can ever write, and for that, you have to put more effort. People think like, I will keep writing a lot of stuff, and one of the tweets just blows up. Well, if that happens, you learn nothing. Like we know a lot of people who have, like every day on my feed, I see people with 1 million views on a tweet. I go to their profile, they have like 500 followers, and you come back to their profile a year later, they will be 1,000 followers. They will not grow very far because they just were lucky. So don't look for luck because there's no luck. I felt there's luck. I literally thought that social media game is a game of luck, and to go viral, you have to be lucky. And that's why quantity is the king. You post a lot of stuff, and also there are people who promote that. They say they keep posting stuff, and then eventually something blows up. But that's not true. That's not true for me. That's not true for others. And even if you have a bunger, you cannot repeat the bunger because the bunger happened because there was some, good timing and good topic, but you don't even understand why. And if you don't understand why, and you can reproduce that, you've learned nothing. That's why my strategy is that I post very little, like once a day, sometimes twice, but usually just once. And I spend a lot of time writing that tweet. And in fact, I write like 10, 20 tweets a day, but only one of them gets published because I just don't like all of them. And sometimes I don't publish any because I just read them. I write them in my drafts. I open them. And I just don't like them. I don't feel like I would actually repost this if I saw it on my feed, and then I just delete it and keep doing that until I find something that's good. And if I don't find, I keep working harder, and it takes time. I think that's the best strategy for social media. And once you get somewhere, once you understand how to create content, once you learn to put time into it, then of course you have to go to all other platforms because now it will just work. Like when I grew on X and I understood how to make the content, I went on Reddit and I went from 0 followers and views and karma into writing the best post of the month or the year there really quick. So that's why people should not be afraid that if I don't keep being active there, then it will be too late. No, if you're good at content, you can grow really fast. You are a good example. You were banned on Twitter and then you recreate yourself, and you're now at 6 or 7,000 followers really fast. Right? So I think people have to focus on their ability to create good content. If you have that ability to create good content, then you can join other networks anytime and it all will be good. And I don't believe that being early somewhere gonna give you something. Like I came on X really late and it was not a problem. If I was there 10 years ago, I would have more followers. But still, the social media all over the world, all social media, they reward best content regardless of your followers. And that's something you have to understand. Like you can have 10 followers, but you can write really good posts that one of them reposts, and then one of the friends of the friend repost, and just goes viral because it's just good.
Just claimed that all the social networks, X, LinkedIn, Reddit, Threads.net, all are the same. But we know that there are some differences, right? People on Reddit are more toxic. You have to be prepared. You have to get used to it. People on LinkedIn are bots. I don't know. I'm not on LinkedIn. I don't know. People on X are more friendly, easy. It makes your content not versatile. You have to adapt to each platform. Is it true?
If you want to maximize the output, you have to do that. But generic, like you have good content, it goes viral everywhere. It's just you might adjust it for a certain platform to make it even more viral, but it will still be noticed by a lot of people. That's why I think the strategy of just copy pasting good content everywhere without modifications works really well. I do that and it works really well. But of course, whenever I adjust my LinkedIn post slightly, because you know that on LinkedIn, to go even more viral, you have to make sure that people look smart in the comment, because like they have to show their competence there. And if they can show their competence in the comments, they will do that. And then there are a lot of comments and then it goes viral. On X, you have to be controversial. You have to say something that people fight in your comments, and then they just fight there, and then it creates a lot of attention. And people come to read the fight in the comments, and then it goes up. On the Reddit, you have to be very altruistic. You have to look like you are really there to get nothing, but only to give. And it's really difficult because even if you're there to give, it's easy to claim by others that you're actually farming something, farming clicks or SEO juice or something. So that's why whenever I copy my content to Reddit, I remove a lot. I remove the links, I remove the names of the brands. I even remove all the kind of number bragging, because people will say, hey, like, why are you bragging with your numbers? So yeah, you have to do a little change.
That's
even if you don't do those changes.
I want to plug in one interesting thing. I saw a strategy on Reddit, which is exclusive for Reddit only, and I think it's genius. What people do, they create a entirely free project, like free website builder, 100% free. They host it on their domain name, and then they make a post on Reddit. It goes viral because people on Reddit love free things. Right?
Yeah.
Then after a few months, you just deploy your main application. For example, if I made a free landing page builder, then I deploy my actual SaaS, which is a website builder, which is not free, which has paid plans. And my post is still there. It still has views. It will be searched.
I get it.
Now I will visit my page because of that post. I think that's genius.
Yeah, it's smart. Very smart. I do that with directories. Directories are free, and I make the post with the directories, and then I just put a banner to my directories, the people and to the users of paid works. Well, I think this one is pretty cool too. But on Reddit, I stopped using Reddit for like 2 or 3 months because it's easy to tweet and write on LinkedIn and Substack, etc. Because you can write something and still not be canceled for it, just because people are kind of nice. On Reddit, a single mistake gonna kill you, and that's why you have to be really careful. And I don't have the capacity to be that careful during summer because I'm in holiday mode, and that's why I'm not writing on Reddit, because it's very painful when you write something and people start trashing you. It's not even to ignore, because Redditors are, they're like world class on making you feel bad. They could win the Olympics if there was an Olympics, on making other people feel bad. And it's difficult to ignore. So that's why I take posts on Reddit until September. And I see that the traffic has dropped. Like Reddit brings a lot of traffic, especially SEO, because you mention your tools and people Google them and then they find them. And that's one of the SEO tricks that I shared once. Maybe some people didn't. But the best way to boost your website on SEO, the single best way, is overnight mention your tool on Reddit, either on comments or in the main post, without URL. And people will go and Google for your tool to find it, and they will find it somewhere below search results, somewhere far. They will find it because they need it. And Google will think that since everyone is searching for that tool or this query, will bring you up instantly and your traffic will just skyrocket overnight. I had that almost every time.
Even for non-brand domain names like SaaS, Mailer.
Yeah, for any. The way Google works is that when they see any query going to your domain, even branded or non-branded, they start to help the other URLs too. So for example, I had this Next.js start and there was no traffic. Like it was like 2 months in, there was no traffic. I created a lot of articles there with using a SEO bot and I added backlinks, but it was a difficult topic because it's just a hot thing. A lot of other like Verso had a lot of content around Next.js and a lot of others. It was real difficult. I almost gave up on the project because I didn't see how I'll fight against the big guns. But then I did Hacker News without URL about this project, and it went viral. And the Hacker News people are very curious. They wanted to go and check. I think they're more curious than Redditors because they are kind of nerdy and they want to see for themselves. So there was like a lot of traffic, like crazy lot. And overnight, all my other pages went up too. So I had traffic on the branded like Next.js starter. But because of that, Google decided that I have a good website and they should boost all other pages too. So I had pages sitting there for 2 months and overnight they all started getting traffic and it just exploded and it's growing ever since. So that's probably the most hidden but the best ever SEO that exists, that you can convince Google that they have an amazing website by doing this.
We got a little distracted by sharing these two great tips, but let's back to the content and social media. You said that the only advice you give is to make good content, focus on being a good storyteller, a good writer, and the platform doesn't matter particularly.
Yeah.
But maybe you have some tips on how to make good content because you're good at that.
I think to make good content, you have to make stories. So it has to look like a story, not like a press release. It has to look like a story, not like a branding material from a big corporation. I think the problem is that people are not original. So when they do something, they kind of repeat what they saw in average. And in average, we see really bad content, surprisingly, because most of the content we see every day is either ads or kind of boosted or paid to influencers. And people see that like very often. I was mentoring people on how to write good content, and they would send me some tweets saying, look, you're criticizing this type of content, but look, this one got 1 million views. And I'm like saying, well, it came from someone with 5 million followers. It means it's bad content because if you have 1 million views on 5 million followers, it's really bad. The good content always scores more views than followers, way more. It has to be at least double. That's good content. So I feel I have to be more original and try to not repeat, not copy the others, but be original. Tell the story as they tell the story in real life. And I think some people are good at stories. Like whenever you meet people, some people are interesting. They tell interesting stories. Some people just, even, they have interesting stories, but they can't tell the story in an interesting way because they tell it as a fact list or like in a boring way. So I think people have to learn that. And the best way to learn that is to keep telling stories. It doesn't have to be even related to things they do, because people think like a guy says, I'm building an extension for Twitter, for example. Like, what can I talk about? It's very few things I can talk about. Everything looks like marketing. And I'm like talk about anything, about your dog. Like, it doesn't have to be related to your product at all, because you have to practice the skill of storytelling. So first you practice the skill itself, how to be interesting on any topic. Once you're being interesting on any topic, now we can start trying to think, how can I be interesting, but also drive some interest to my product? And first you can do it very stupid way. You have a great story and at the end you say, well, that was my story and here's my product. There is no link. It's just I'm the author of book, right? And that will work. If you like your story, people will also like to read about your product or try your product. And I did that at the beginning. At the beginning, I didn't have any link between my products and stories. It was just like people still and you can embed your products in the story. You can make stories which somehow will lead to your promise. And then it's two in one. But also, don't be like a machine and like everybody else with a machine. Like try to be an interesting storyteller.
Practice in real life just by talking with people.
It's like you're gonna be positive about who they start every year. Yeah, I mean, in real life, it's the easiest, and usually people who are good at on social media, they are also good at that in real life. But I think there is large number of people who are generally shy in real life, because in real life you have to be a good storyteller, but also there are other things you have to be good at. You have to be good at standing people you don't know, and that's sometimes difficult. So I think it is enough to be on social media. I think it's enough because again, it's a limited number of attempts you have. In real life, if you say if tell a great story, you're gonna feel really bad. Well, not interesting. Write not interesting story on Twitter and you have no likes. That's fine. You go to the next and you keep trying that as long as you can. It's more iterations you can do. You can write 10 stories a day. At the beginning, I had a lot of stories I was publishing. I would spend like hours and hours to writing, and then just seeing which one resonates, and then write more of that. That's why I think introverts should thrive on Twitter, because on Twitter there is no pressure of other people's eyes. At least you don't see them.
Let's move to the next topic. The question I have been asked many times, maybe 100 or more. I'm sure you as well. How to combine your desk job and your startup? Is it possible to combine, or should I just quit my 9-to-5 job, say goodbye to my boss, and full focus on my thing? What's your opinion?
I think people should never quit their income source, because it will take them forever to, it can take years or it's decades. And if you are short on money 3 months after you started, it's not good. Like for some people, being short on money will mean that they will move faster and thinking sharper. For some people, but for most people, stress will destroy them. So you have to see who you are. Like, I know people who need that tiger chasing them and they are really good. But most people I know, they get frozen when there's tiger behind them and they just can't run it off. So I think people should always assume they're average unless it's proven the other. I've done that myself. I've always assumed that I'm average on everything, both the stores and building, on like everything. And over time, if you're not average, you will see that. But don't assume at the start that you're above average on any of those. That's why have the runway for yourself. Either make a lot of money and have 3-year runway by moving to Bali or somewhere where it's cheap. That's one way of doing it. But I think when people spend the money they earned, they still feel stressed. Even if it's not that much money, but you still feel stressed because you're spending the money you have and it's less money left on your bank account every day. That's why I think having an easy job is a great idea. And I don't see that being like the shortage on the market is so huge. Demand is so huge for people that I think you can always find some smaller startup that can afford full-time employees, and you just work for them 2 days a week, and you do something simple for them, and they are happy, and you are happy, and you get paid few a month, and that's enough to pay your bills. I think, and also that's being indie maker is really lonely, and when you work with someone, it also gives you some crowd to hang out with, which is not that bad, because I think most of the makers end up burning it because they're lonely, because it's just they're on their own with their problems. So that's why my advice is to have a main job, because if you have a full-time job, you will have too little time left for indie making, and you will sacrifice your health. Think about that. And when I can time, I would work less, because there's no difference between making 5K or 3K a month. There's no difference. If you make 3K a month, you just move to a small apartment, and that's better than working 80 hours and destroying your health.
For me, it was the opposite. I was trying to combine my freelancer gigs with my own startup when I was starting in 2016. And it was a horrible experience, because it's so hard to split your mind, so hard to work on a client for 6 hours and then 6 hours on something else. And what I did is, me and my co-founder, we rented a cheap 0-bedroom studio and we lived there together, cut our costs dramatically. And what we did is full focus on our thing. And after these years, I have seen a lot of people who tried to combine their 9 to 5 with their own startup, and all of them failed, like 99%. But the ones who left, they have more chances to be successful. I advise to quit if possible, if you don't have dependence, but because combination is something I don't believe in anymore.
I would see this topic slightly deeper. I think anyone who is building startup will fail with 99% chance. It makes a lot of sense to have main job and fail with your startup several times. And eventually, once you get practiced, you get more practice and you learn the thing and you get just smarter at the whole thing. At some point, when you feel the maturity and you feel like you've been doing it for a while and you feel like now, you know the things, maybe now you should quit. But I would never go all in with your first ever startup, because you're going to fail and then you will most likely, you will take it very personally. It'll be difficult to recover. You'll feel like a loser and people will feel you're a loser. Your wife will think you're a loser. So I think you should think it that way. Like never assume that the startup path is like you come up with an idea, you build it and you succeed. It's rather you come up with an idea, you build it, but you learn several times, and then at some point you go to the real button. So basically you practice first several times and practice being employed somewhere. But once you want to go for real battle, maybe quit the job and go full into this project, but not at the first attempt.
Okay, thanks for your thoughts. That's all for today. Bye, folks.